Okay, it looks like we are ready to go. I am, I am excited. And this is kind of wonderful that we will have an opportunity to have a great conversation to talk about going where the talent is and making location decisions. I am Gloria Castillo. I am director of We Rise Together for an Equitable and Just Recovery at the Chicago Community Trust. And it is absolutely my delight to welcome our two speakers. Matt Johansson is Senior Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Discover Financial Services. And he is joined by his partner in this strategy, Susan Dunseth, Vice President of Business Development at Skills for Chicagoland's Future. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to hear from our presenters. They'll talk with us for about 25 minutes and give us some insights, and then we're going to open the floor for questions. So you can do that either in chat or raising your hand and then unmuting yourself. I'm going to encourage everybody to keep your video on because it feels much more like a conversation when we can see each other rather than just your names. So if you could, if you're in a position to keep your video on, that's terrific. Just make sure that you're muted while we're hearing from our speakers. I will try to keep us on schedule, and I'll let you know when we've got about a 2-minute warning. So if I break in, that's why I am being rude. But other than that, I am going to turn it over to our speakers. Matt, can you kick us off?
Sure. I think Susan and I did a little planning here. We have no fancy PowerPoint slides. So you just have to look at our faces today. And hopefully Susan's more than mine. And just tell a little bit of our story and engage back and forth. We have another great partner here who's in the room with us, Leon Walker, joined as well. So that's great to see you, Leon. Thanks for joining. But I'll give you a little bit of background, and then Susan and I will go back and forth a little bit just to fill out the story. But for those of you who may not know kind of the big picture here is that Discover, which is a Chicagoland-based organization. We're a 35-year-old financial services firm. Our headquarters started originally by Sears, spun out when they kind of divested away from their stocks and socks strategy, went through a couple mergers with Morgan Stanley, Dean Winter, and have been a public company since 2007. We're the 5th largest credit card issuer in the United States, and that's how most people are aware of us. Treat you like we treat you, or I don't even know what our tagline is, but you see a lot of television commercials during hockey games, especially. So that's how we're known. But we are a full digital bank with loan and deposit products, and we run a global network as well for the acceptance of payments. I've been at Discover for 25 years, most recently, as Gloria said, leading DE&I. And for the last year and a half, I've been engaged to lead a project to open a new customer contact center in the Chatham neighborhood where I am today, kind of on the south side of Chicago. So this whole concept of putting jobs where people are rather than in a central business district or a cluster of call centers, originated in 2019 when our CEO, Roger Hochschild, went to a talk with Ibram Kendi. He was talking about being an anti-racist. And he tells this great story about how he learned kind of really two things kind of punched him in the face that day. One is that the opposite of being racist is not being racist. It's being anti-racist. It's about doing something to reverse racism. And then just, really compelled about the historic bias that is built into so many of our systemic corporate processes, and site selection being one of those that is most biased, that no company has ever said, hey, we are not going to put, now maybe there have been, I don't know them, but we're not going to put our locations in a Black or brown community. What we say is, oh, we want to go into a a good community. We want to go where there's good schools, where there's high levels of education, where there's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we all end up in the same lily white places. And so the idea here was, what do we have? What's our greatest asset? How do we use that asset to actually reverse historic wrongs? And one of the greatest assets we have is 18,000 jobs. And how do we put some of those jobs where they will have more impact than we've historically had them? We have 9,000 back office contact center agents across 4 centers in Delaware, Columbus, Ohio, Phoenix, and Salt Lake City, Utah. And moving 1,000 of those jobs. So either at the time, we just talked about the south or the west side of Chicago. It's our hometown. There are plenty of de-invested communities where these jobs would have material impact. And we really wanted to answer the call from Mayor Lightfoot's Invest Southwest initiative to, and the Together We Rise initiative to be part of the answer on how we were going to have a fast and equitable recovery and how we were going to be more equitable in where our jobs went. So we set out on site selection. Well, actually, first, I should say the first thing we did was connect with Skills for Chicagoland's Future. We had a nice happen chance meeting between Marie, CEO of Skills, and our CHRO, and brought them in to help consult with us. And it was, kind of great luck for us, quite honestly, to have connected with a workforce agency that was focused on supply side, that was or demand side, focused on corporate relationships, and could kind of give us some good wisdom about going about our process. Next thing was site selection. So we started scanning the south and the west sides. Turned out to be a kind of an interesting process, reorienting internal processes. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but one of the great challenges is reorienting. We as a corporation, just like most companies, right? We try to do things in a way that are efficient, fast, cost-effective for us, right? And this initiative was explicitly not doing that. So when we engaged on, say, workforce analysis for a new center, inevitably those things come back and say, well, here's where you can put a location, for $1 less an hour for the next 20 years, rather than, looking at what are the employment rates and unemployment rates, what are the poverty levels, what are the average incomes, like where could we have the most impact by placing our jobs. Needed to kind of flip that on its ear. In the end, Leon Walker, DL3 Realty, is owner of the building that I'm in now, which was an abandoned Target building, and 87th and Cottage Grove in the Chatham neighborhood. And 2 things really sold us here. Number one, just the potential of Chatham, the talent that's here, the untapped talent that's here, the pride in the community, the historic kind of middle-class Black neighborhood that had real potential when partners like Target weren't de-investing and when someone might invest. And Leon, did a great job selling us on the possibilities there. And then secondly, we look at this location and say 5 of the 10 locations that are in the Invest Southwest program border Chatham or within a 3-mile radius of this location. And knowing that 1,000 jobs aren't going to come from a single neighborhood, gave us a great area to focus in that we could really have material impact in those. So we ended up in Chatham and opened the doors here on the first 20,000 square feet in June. We've hired nearly 200 people, on track to probably get to 500 or 600 people next year and 1,000 by 2023. So that's our story in short. So Susan, as I was telling that, kind of often what people ask, the first question they ask is like, why? Why were you doing that? What was the problem you're trying to solve? I told a little bit of that, but I'd be really curious for you to just share, from an outsider's perspective, as you were working with us, what were you hearing then and what do you hear now?
Thank you, Matt. And it has been my distinct pleasure to partner with Matt and the team at Discover over the last 2 years on this initiative. But that why becomes a critical question. And I think, there was the why we were interested. And then I think the why we even became more interested the more we got to know about the team at Discover. But As I think Matt started with, the question we usually get as we partner with employers on this demand driven is the transportation plans and how we're going to relocate candidates from where they live, where the unemployed live, to wherever that business is, whether that be in the loop or the suburbs. This was one of the first unique times that we had an employer come to us and say just the opposite. We want to go where the talent is. I know that every industry and every business can't make that decision today, but when you think about the war for talent right now, and you think about the trouble that people are having finding talent, I don't want to share Matt's secrets, but that is not a problem with Chatham right now. The talent is there, and that is not a question that we work with Discover on a weekly basis on, versus 90+% of our other employers, is that talent is there. It's just a matter of the fact that they needed a place to go so that they didn't have to bus, train, commute for an hour at a time. I know in the first class that we helped staff, they mentioned, I think it was 11 out of the 14 people said the number one reason they were there was location. That was why they chose that job over anything else, was it was simply now they could spend time with their families and get that quality of life. So for the why for us was pretty much, we didn't see this very often that an organization would do that. But I think the second thing is, as we got to know Discover, the why was much more than just jobs. The why, as you heard him talk about Roger and the impact that that event he'd gone to had on him, but the why was making a much larger economic impact in a Chicago neighborhood. And so I think that's where we sort of now, when we talk to employers on why you might want to do this, and I think Leon gave us a little class on this too, as we've talked to him, is that if the why is not really because you're leading with DEI, you're probably making the wrong decision. And so if that is not that crux of what this is, you're probably going to have just consternation inside your organization. It's going to be hard to tell whether it's political leaders or the press why you're doing it, but that why really becomes critical. And so seeing that this was much more than just jobs, this was making a very bold move to change the economic fabric of a Chicago neighborhood, we were sold. So Matt, I might ask, go ahead.
Yeah, no, good. Just going to build on that. I mean, it's true, right? If you don't lead with DE&I, you're not going to make this choice. The interesting thing that we've learned thus far, though, and so again, we opened in June, started hiring our first classes. We hired a group of leaders in May, and then our first class of agents in June, and on that path to 200. The interesting thing that we've learned is we thought this was primarily, again, we want to create economic opportunity with the jobs that we have. But it is doing far more to accelerate our DE&I journey than we are having impact on the community. We will have a lot of impact, 1,000 jobs with real focus on local Black-owned facility operations, local Black-owned construction of the center, local restaurants providing food service here. We are engaging with the community as much as we can, but in doing that, we are learning more and learning faster than we ever would any other way possible. The lessons that we're learning and the results that we're seeing that DEI is literally the best way to get business results. So Susan referenced it, right? The punchline here is for our first 150 agent jobs, we've had over 5,000 applications, right? And so at a time when people say they can't hire anybody, we've had 5,000 applications. Even when we say, hey, we want to be hyper-focused with local hiring. We want to hire within this 5-mile radius. We set a goal for ourselves for 80% hiring. Even if you narrow it down to applications, qualified applications that come from that scope, we still have 10 times as many applications as we can hire. And nobody's leaving. And at a time where customer service and in the rest of our organization, we're well north of 50% annualized attrition in these jobs. We are less than 5% here through, again, since May. So it's 200 people. And first 90 days is always, as we talked about in our last breakout session, the first 90 days is always the worst attrition. And we've not seen it. And it only gets better from here. So why is that? What's the magic here? Well, again, it's local, right? It is in there, and its purpose. Don't just come for the job, but come for the job and come for the opportunity to help us create economic opportunity into your in your community. And people are coming for that. They're staying for that. Our engagement scores are 10 to 15 points higher than anywhere else in the company. And 4 months running, this center has hit our 5-year North Star goal for customer experience scores. So our customers are telling us, this is the best service you've ever provided. And we are a company that provide ourselves. Our brand stands for customer service. We have 100% US-based customer service, and that's what most of our advertisements are for. And so coming here with customer service might not sound like much, but it is kind of the crown jewel of the company. And it is better here than it is anywhere else. So DEI is not just, you can influence with DEI, you can influence the community, make impact, but it will get you the best business results. And that's evidently clear to us in these few short months.
I think that saying of, talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not, is like never more accurate than what we found with this. And we just sort of needed the pilot project to I think have the case study to show that was happening. Matt, I'm sure some of the folks on the call might want to know a little bit about the barriers that you've encountered. Because obviously when there's not a roadmap to necessarily doing this, I feel like you've sort of pioneered some of these things, which I know you're more than happy to share. But maybe if you could talk a little bit about that for a second, that could be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the big picture there is not nearly as much as we've thought, right? There are not nearly as many barriers as we have thought. In fact, Roger was down here a couple of weeks ago, and he even was asking, like, aren't you all waiting for the next shoe to drop? Like something's got to go wrong, right? I mean, at some point, this has to be. And so I think, what's shielded, of course, from the CEO is how hard it is to do internally. And I would still say that that's our biggest barrier. Holly might smile. I guess I've got a reputation now because I love to, this idea that business as usual, the breaking the BAU and these mindset of, efficiency does not equal equity, right? That efficiency for us, which is everything that we harp on and talk about, right? How do we add more value and create more value in everything that we do internally? That does not always equal equity. And so now we're bringing a different stakeholder into the game here, right? We're bringing a different part of the equation to our value prop here. And that is not easy for people to get away from. So whether it's, think about from facilities and real estate and maintenance of the center to our operations, how we source candidates, how we hire, how we onboard, how we train, how we support employees. We have to break BAU on all of that, right? We have to think beyond what do we do elsewhere to what is required here. And when we do that, we get great results, obviously, but that is like a day-to-day, hand-to-hand combat battle to do that. And so I think that is really kind of the biggest barrier that we've faced. But there's also, flip side, some, just amazing things that have come out of this. Like the energy around Chatham within Discover is undeniable. And so I love to tell this story. Now it's a few months ago, but I was in our headquarters up in the northern suburbs. We're still largely work from home, but there was, so you're always excited when you see another human being in the building, and saw a woman that I did not recognize. So I introduced myself, she introduced herself. So she's a senior director in our information technology, had just joined Discover like a month earlier. And she was telling me that when we exchanged what we each do, she says it's amazing, right? So I had 4 great offers, and she told me about the other 3 offers, and I chose this one because I had read what you guys are doing in Chatham. I did this because I wanted to join a purpose-driven organization. So there is goodness, not, again, just what we're learning about DE&I, but people want to work for a purpose-driven organization. They want to have more than just the job, and it's amazing the energy that it's creating across the organization.
Matt, I always, that story always resonated with me because I think at the same time, Skills had seen a survey about, you know, we were doing war for talent calls ourselves, and hearing that employees were saying, even at entry level roles, 3 out of 4 people would say that if they had a choice between jobs, they would go to the one where DE&I was the leading strategy that they were working on. And so I just think it's not just, you know, we are so far past the days of just a pie chart that says that I hire from different communities. We are, what is the action that you are taking inside your company that now is a recruitment tool to get people. That is, I can't even think about that 2 or 3 years ago in the workforce space. And now what that has really become something that if you're not leading with that, you're probably leaving talent, you know, out there.
Yeah. So couldn't agree more. Maybe wrap up, Susan, you know, people ask a lot, like, if you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently? So I'll ask you that question. How would you consult us differently?
Well, it's funny because we do a lot of, and I've got some of my comrades on the call too, but we do a lot of reflection in the background about what we would do differently. And then Matt and I have actually talked about this. But I think that, you know, in getting into true consulting work, which is what this was, I think for us, you know, this was the first time that Discover had opened. Was it 20 years that they had opened a call center? They had never opened one in a Chicago neighborhood. And they'd never really gotten into workforce staffing. It just wasn't something that they had to do in their other call centers. So we, you know, coming in as that partner, I think that if I could change anything, you know, I think at some days we're sort of like, they're a Fortune 500 company. They know what they're doing. And yet I've said, I think we should have pressed harder sometimes on some things that maybe, you know, we were the experts. And I think when I look at corporations that are still talking to us about things today, they don't necessarily know the landscape of the neighborhoods. They don't necessarily know how workforce works and the certain things that community-based organizations are going to need for support. So I would say, if anything, I would say I push a little bit. And so when we heard like, oh, legal or compliance, don't really think we can do those things. I think, you know, we take the advice from our children, which is, well, why? Right? And why? And I think if we can sort of go in with that, as we started this whole project, I think that's the answer that everything has come down to, is like, well, we do this way, but why? Yeah. And I think we can grow as we hopefully help other corporations do the same kind of initiative, and push a little more on the why. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, what about you? Yeah, same thing. From the perspective of Skills, that's exactly the kind of answer I'd offer, is just be more directive with us, right? Yep. We don't know what we don't know. And corporations, again, do not know what they don't know. And at some point, when you're trying to be nice, we kind of miss your point, right? So, you know, punch us between the eyes a little bit, you know, will help us a great deal. And I think from, you know, for others that would be considering this, I think having a partner, right, having a consultant, Skills is one, but there's a multitude, right? And going in humbly and understanding that what you don't know that you don't know is the largest part of the knowledge you need to be successful. And be humble and be a learner, right? That's number one. Find a partner and be humble for sure. And then the other kind of point of, not that we didn't know, it's just I don't know that we had the scope of how important it was to find the right leader for the center. And a different leader than we typically have anywhere else in the organization. We knew, and we'd been consulted, that we needed to find someone to run the center, a local candidate from that, and then we could teach them about Discover. But we had to find somebody who knew the community and could help us be invited into the community versus showing up as, you know, kind of the white savior thing, right? Like, you know, hey, here we come with our jobs, and, you know, but literally to be invited. And who was going to help us do that? Now, we got incredibly lucky because we found a woman who is in our operations in Utah, who had been with Discover for 10 years, had been through 3 of our operation centers, 4 of our different operations, you know, kind of was a top right box up and comer, who happened to grow up in Roseland, right? So someone who was here all through high school, left in the middle of high school, and then worked for Discover. And she's a superstar, you know, flat out, right? She is a superstar. And she spends, I would say, 75% of her time outside this building or with other groups from outside the building,
walking them around this building, right? Her job is community engagement as much as it is, but not just, this isn't, like, hey, let's do an event. Let's, give a donation, right? This is true community engagement. How do we help amplify the good work that's going on everywhere in the community and be a good partner, be a good neighbor for the long run? And if we didn't have that, we would have been sunk, right? There's no way we would be where we are today or have the early results that we have. So I cannot emphasize the need. It's going to be hard to find another Watis, but this idea of finding a leader who knows the community and as quickly as possible can get up to speed on your operation as well is going to be critical.
Matt and Susan, this is so fabulous. We're going to open it up for questions, and I'll remind people that they can raise their hand or they can put them in the chat. And if you don't mind, I'll take a little bit of privilege and jump in with the first question. You mentioned, Matt, that you're working with local businesses, to do lunch and food service, and I suspect that that's part of that community engagement. Could you build that out a little bit more? Tell us a little bit more about that community engagement. Who are you bringing in to cater lunches? How does that work? How would other companies think about doing that, even if they're not in Chatham?
Yeah. So I would say it's kind of all hands on deck in terms of, scanning out and firing. Every time we meet somebody, World Business Chicago just introduced us to a new LaForest guy who works on community engagement there. And so our first ask for him is, what restaurant owners, caterers do you know on the South Side that can help us with food service? Because, quite honestly, what we're finding is even at the scale that we're at now, that still overwhelms most local restaurants, right? So also ask the question, where's there a caterer, where's a restaurant that you would know that we could invest with, right? And find a way to scale up to where we're going, right? We're at 200 now. We're going to be at 1,000 soon enough, right? So what is that going to look like? The thing, again, going back to that question of, it's always easiest to go back to, hey, Sodexo provides, food service for us everywhere else. We'll just have Sodexo come in and do it here. No, that's never going to be the right answer here, right? I would rather, whatever I'm going to invest in Sodexo, find a willing partner here. We've not found the answer, I guess, Gloria, but we continue to search for it.
And I noticed that, Leon, you mentioned it's great to be a partner. Could you talk a little, do you mind just mentioning a little bit about what it's like to be a partner in this?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Matt, terrific job. Nice to see you. Really great work in leadership around this investment. I want people to hear from Matt more than me, because I want him to talk about the, this moment in time that we're in. And is this a window, or do you really feel that we have traction long term? I'm very, even today, Holly, a lot of people were interested in the sort of workforce type conversations, and we've seen that before. We've been intentional, and I'm pleased to, be with leadership of, this organization, talking about shaping a vision statement around companies really going beyond a charitable concept around these initiatives, and understanding that this is central or key to their long-term business success. And I'm hoping that we can get the dialogue, it's a great thing to do, it's a wonderful thing to do, it's a halo, but beyond that, I think you touched on it when we talked about the recruitment potential and the, getting, people who want to be a part of the organization, that is an extra competitive sort of part of it to recruit talent. But that's great, and that's a driver. But are there other drivers that, I know there are others, so I know, Matt, you can talk about some of those other drivers. This is the best or the most efficient call center operation in the country. There's some surprises here that I think hit home on the business case.
Absolutely. Yeah, that notion that DEI is the best way to make your business results, I think it's undeniable. As soon as I still get, the little head fakes internally people want to say, well, it's still early, it's still, we'll see when we really settle in, but I point two things out to people. Number one, we're just benchmarking ourselves against, kind of same age classes everywhere else around the company, right? So we're not, and we are significantly better, again, in customer experience scores, the one thing that needs to be delivered here, of all new hires. And then to the point that we're exceeding even the 5-year North Star, which is assumed going to require much more technological AI assist, et cetera, in order to get to those scores. And while we talk about like attrition and retention, the difference between 5% and 60%, think about that at a scale of 9,000 people at a cost of 14,000 per attrition, right? Do the math in your head and you start to see that this is material bottom line impact, right? The ability to have purpose, drive engagement, drive customer service, and retention is a major business driver, right? There is no better business. Give me one other thing that reduces attrition from 60% to 5%. Name it. We haven't found it. So, anyone else before we have to go? I know we're minutes away.
Yeah, we just got our 2-minute warning. And maybe Matt and Susan, if you were going to say one thing about going where the talent is, what would be your one bit of advice?
I feel like it's going to be repetitive, but I think this whole story leads to that the moment in time might present an opportunity, but the long-term business effects are really what is going to drive business. I think that Discover has proven that if you lead with the right things, business, I'm always taught me, like do unto others, because that will turn around, right? Karma will be there. And I think that Discover's really just led the corporate community. And when you do what is right, it's also going to help your business. It's that double bottom line.
And I'll just say, call me. I will be happy to help. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Anything I can ever do to help, let me know. But just
Wonderful. Do it. Don't forget to answer the survey. Stay with us for the rest of the program as you leave this section. We're going to have a little wrap up, and then we'll look forward to seeing you in 47 seconds in the next room.
Thanks, Gloria.
So much, Matt. Thanks,
Gloria.
Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you, Matt
much.
and Susan. Terrific.
Nice job, everybody.
Well, I hope everyone enjoyed their sessions.